Starting in the competitive Splatoon community can be tough. The game doesn't really do a good job of teaching players what they need to learn to succeed in a coordinated environment. Sure, solo teaches you how to aim, how to move, and what positions are important, but with a limited communication, working with a team is something you'll rarely see in Anarchy. This can leave a lot of players confused. How do I work with a team is a question that's fundamental to understanding the game at a higher level, yet the game is completely uninterested in providing an answer. Ultimately, this question is going to have to be answered by the community. Luckily for us, Splatoon already has a strong framework for understanding team play and team structure. Years ago, back in the ancient days of Spoon 2, FLC put out a system that we still use to this day. It outlines 4 priorities for every member of a team. In order, they are: don't wipe. Wiping allows the enemy team to take control over the map completely uncontested. Even 1 or 2 players alive can help slow down the enemy's approach, so it's far more important for some people on the team to stay alive than anything else. Engage the enemy. Engaging with the enemy keeps them from gaining ground. Notably, this priority isn't to win fights, just to start. Of course, you don't want to lose either, but the goal is to hold off the enemy team. Win fights. Now we try to strike at the enemy team. While it's less important than stopping the enemy's approach, being able to pick off some enemies lets you start making pushes yourself. Accelerate. Once you've gotten the edge, it's time to maintain that momentum. Move up and set yourself and your team up for even more success. You need to maintain these priorities and be prepared to shift your focus on the fly. Luckily, the responsibility isn't solely yours to bear. You have a few teammates, and unlike solo queue, they'll actually work with you. Those priorities are universal, yes, but they can be split into a few different roles that each primarily focus on one: the anchor, skirmisher, slayer, and utility. Let's start with the anchor. The goal of an anchor is to stay alive first and foremost. Why? You give the team someone to fall back on while providing a much needed jump spot to speed up the respawn process. This doesn't mean you should be hiding in a corner somewhere, avoiding everyone. You should still be engaging with those other priorities when death isn't a risk. But to do this, you must be able to be effective while still playing safe. Of course, the easiest way to do this is with range. Long-range weapons can be effective without being threatened. Stay in the back and fire towards the enemy. Almost paradoxically, you don't want to stay at the edge of your range. You want to play as close as you can while staying safe. That way you can still threaten kills. At first, this will probably be at the edge of your range, but as you learn how to defend yourself and have faster reactions, you'll be able to be safe closer and closer to the battlefield. You'll become more threatening, though do keep in mind, your main goal is always to stay alive. Now the skirmisher plays very differently. The skirmisher is the first of a fighting pair. The skirmisher is there not for kills, but to start fights and draw attention. Think of yourself as a tank in an RPG. You're threatening kills, demanding attention, but refusing to die. If you leave them alone, they're the most threatening weapon. A skirmisher can stay alive through a few means. You could be a face tank, using a umbrella shield or a splash wall to take damage in your place. A dodge tank, evading everything in order to maintain constant pressure. Or a trick tank, where you use and abuse parts of the map in order to maintain your own safety. Skirmishers are the best at initiating fights and holding opponents at bay. However, just because the goal is to not die doesn't mean the role is best at it. In fact, skirmishers are the most likely weapon to go down due to all the attention they get. But the detention is for a very good reason. The skirmisher is there to set up and support the other players. The reason to initiate a fight is to allow someone else to follow up and end it. Like I said, it's part of a pair. On its own, it can be rather defensive, but its real strength comes from setting enemies up to be picked off by another player. It won't get lots of kills itself, but is instrumental in gaining ground. If a skirmisher is a tank, then the slayer is a DPS. It's the second of the fighting pair, the one that goes in for every one of those kills. However, a fair number of people get this role conflated with skirmishers. Slayers don't often start fights. They're there to follow up and secure kills. They walk up to a disoriented, displaced team and hold the fire button. They don't put themselves in nearly as much risk as a skirmisher, often playing safer and going for kills only when there's a clear advantage. A good slayer is fast and consistent. Since you don't have the burden of attention, you're free to get in and take out as many enemies as you can. That doesn't mean you can play selfishly. The goal is to kill enemies before they can do the same to you and your team. In fact, a good slayer is often judged not by their own death count, but by their team's. To do this, you need to recognize and quickly act on opportunities to get picks. By being quick, you get to win fights and keep everyone safe. The utility role is a bit of a catch-all role for many other playstyles that support the team. It's the least important role, but it's still necessary for flexibility. While there are many ways to play utility, there are a few common ways: crossfire, defense, and support. Crossfire utility is made up of fast-killing mid-range weapons that are used to provide fire at off angles and further split the attention of enemies. You ain't a skirmisher, you don't put yourself in nearly as much danger, but you do help with combat to ensure it's in your favor. Provide suppressive fire, but don't put yourself in harm's way. You are simply there to fire at an off angle and to throw off foes. Defensive utility is typically made up of weapons that are strong in 1v1s and take fights to shore up the area you already control. They often aren't strong enough to be a slayer, but they can take fights when they have turf advantage. Think Roller, a weapon that doesn't have the strength to push ahead like slayers, but are able to defend an area already taken with incredible power. Support utility is all about maintaining paint and charging their special to use for pushes. This often involves inking the team's feet and ensuring they have mobility while you can send out a crab every 30 seconds. Often support isn't great on its own. If your only purpose is to use your special, once you do, you're not helping nearly as much as another weapon could. Even so, in some team comps, maintaining paint and spamming special could be exactly what's needed. All these types do have one thing in common. Namely, they're the least important role. If someone goes down or needs to grab the objective, support is the first to go. The roles the others fill are far more valuable than your role. You're the crack filler. If there's a problem, you're there to hopefully patch it up. At most levels of play, all teams should have a player in each of these roles. While some comps can work with duplicates or hybrids, they can be very difficult to pull off. But having someone completely stick to one role isn't very useful either. Just like the team priorities, some are more important than others. Anchor is more important than a skirmisher, which in turn matters more than a slayer, which is again more valuable than utility. So what happens when a role goes down? Your team needs to shift. Sticking rigidly to a single role the entire game is a recipe for disaster. If the anchor goes down, that means you haven't a place to jump to and fall back on. Someone needs to take on the role until your dedicated anchor is back. This goes for all roles in order of priority. Typically you backfill. Skirmisher becomes anchor, slayer becomes skirmisher, utility becomes slayer. Since anchor is the most important, your dedicated anchor typically doesn't shift much. But this isn't always the case. Sometimes the utility will turn skirmisher instead of slayer. Sometimes your utility becomes the anchor instead. Sometimes the slayer can skip straight to anchor. Talk to your team about it beforehand so everyone knows who's taking on what roles as they go down. Because they will go down. If there's anything you should expect in Splamp, it's Murphy's Law. If something can go wrong, it will go wrong. Playing at a high level isn't just about prepping for the ideal circumstances, but doomsday prepping. In ideal circumstances, you would always be able to play your preferred role. However, someone's going to go down, somewhere, and someone's going to have to fill that spot. Being aware of the game state and shifting appropriately is going to make or break your game. If you can master it, your team will become far more cohesive. If you can't, well, you're left on your own. Remember, it's not you who wins the game. It's the whole team.